Cool. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. So this is the third in the series on awakening to the imaginal realm. And today we're going to talk about metaphor and myth. And in my model of experience, it's like everything has a body aspect, a heart aspect, a mind, and a soul. And the imaginal realm is kind of like it's like the soul aspect of sort of transcendental experience or non-dual, kind of bigger than us experience. And then, within each of that, it has a body, heart, mind. And this is the mind aspect of the imaginal realm. So we're going to be a little more like cognitive today, a bit more kind of few exercises, working in small groups. If you're at home or watching on a recording, have a pen and paper. And it's really about finding a sense of the mind's way of kind of getting into this more imaginal, kind of like metaphorically fueled way of experiencing the world and feeling the way in which we're sort of an emulation of these kind of myths and stories and metaphors and meaning, and everything's just sort of like unfolding in this way. And particularly in our kind of modern culture, we have a job that you have to do, and school where things are right and wrong, and all of these things. It's a very sort of like, it's not welcomed that often, this more sort of metaphorical way of being. So it's kind of like, we're just going to find some ways to feel into the mind's way of making sense in this more imaginal way today. And in my model, the kind of the mind column is about cultivating emptiness. And it's an interesting one because emptiness is generally a very sort of like Buddhist term, and it's really understood as part of an expression of the kind of non-self, where things are like empty of inherent existence. And it's interesting to kind of be in the soul realm, which is talking more about this sort of like essence of experience, this kind of meaning, this like inherent meaning, this deep, sort of like part of our being that is, has an essence or a deep truth in it. And to be talking about emptiness, those two are often not, seen as sort of maybe mutually exclusive. But in this context, we're kind of talking about them together. And that's the way that we're doing that, is feeling into the way that every moment has a kind of essence of truth in it, but that is incredibly flexible. It's sort of like way more flexible and multidimensional and rich than our typical kind of like logical minds would have us think. There's just much more, many more ways of looking at things than people normally conceive of. But there is this sort of like, some kind of truth layer and essence and sort of like soul level resonance and alignment that we can get in touch with. And metaphor and myth are the tools that allow for both of those things to be true. So that's what we're going to be feeling into today. So with this more sort of flexible understanding of experience, it's almost like the sense that our kind of energy, our emotions, our meaning-making systems, it's like rather than things being very fixed in a way where this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and it's very linear and sort of almost assumed that these impacts and these habit pathways would create a certain set of outcomes. It's almost like you open up a lot more space and emptiness, and by working with metaphor and meaning, you can kind of like start to feel into the depths of your experience. And it's like you can channel different emotions through images or through your imagination, and almost like feel into, what would that feel like if I imagined X, Y, Z? and kind of like do the sort of like, the emotional processing, the mental processing, the kind of like feelings around the thing, in this much more open, spacious way. So it's almost like working with the imaginal and the metaphor and myth. It's often very alchemical because we're letting things in that are resonating deeply, that are changing us. We're feeling on a deep level. It's I think it's important that the kind of reason it's gone through this series has gone through from the Somatic-imaginal one first, followed by Eros, followed by metaphor and myth, is that it's really important that the metaphor and myth, for it to be working, is built on this base of sort of open-hearted Eros, kind of really allowing things to move you, because then its realness becomes alive. So rather than it just being a kind of mental exercise of, oh, a metaphor and a myth and a this and a that, it's more sort of like really deeply embodied and felt and experienced. And then that can really like open things up in a sort of deeply embodied, resonant way, where suddenly the world can sort of come alive in this metaphorical, mythic way. So we're going to do a little exercise to start, because it's like, with all the imaginal stuff, it's really hard to talk about, but when you like get into the thing, you start to feel it. So, and this exercise, it's kind of drawn from a book called Metaphors We Live By, which is talking about how essentially all our language is metaphorical, and every experience that we have is it's like a conversation between our body and our embodied reality, and this sort of like capacity to abstract and think in an ineffable metaphorical way. So to give an example, here we are, like sitting, there's some bodies in this room and we're sitting and we're talking about a topic, and I could use different language, different metaphors to describe what we're doing. So one thing I could say is we're really dropping in and feeling the depths of experience. So that the dropping in gives a sense of like, and feeling the depths of experience. It's kind of like all of these things have an embodied depths, suggest, like we're going kind of down and in and feeling. Another way I could describe it is we're increasing clarity and opening to the truth of reality. And to me, that's like increasing kind of it's like we're turning up the dial on something. We're like, oh, clarity is going up, and opening to the truth of reality. It's more of an outwards movement. We're like opening. And just the way that those subtle metaphors and subtle words like create a different mood and a different feel, and both could be true. And like, which one do we choose and why do we choose it? And where does that resonance come from? And like, what does the capacity to be flexible with that language afford? Is just really interesting, and is what we're going to explore. So we're going to do some small group exercise. So maybe in groups of 3 looks good. And we're going to feel into this sense of how metaphor and not just metaphor, but almost like the whole way in which we use language and conceptualize our experience is painting a picture of what experience is. And then that's then in turn kind of creating our experience, and our experience is creating it. And it's this sort of like continual conversation. So the first exercise we're going to do is go into small groups of 3 and share some different metaphors for either awakening, spiritual practice, meditation, just something that you can kind of resonate with as like, oh, this is kind of like the reason you come to the Alembic, whether it's a meditation practice, a spiritual practice, a contemplative practice, and almost think of some metaphors that could describe that. So, and just share that, just have a chat about that. So Just to give some examples, it's like, you know, a really common one is the spiritual path. And the path is like a metaphor where we're going on a journey, we're going somewhere, not sure where, depends kind of like what your conception is. Another one is like, oh, experience is a continual dance. That's like a very common one that people use. Yeah, and just like feeling into coming up with maybe 3 or 4 metaphors each of sort of like how you would describe meditation or spiritual practice. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. And we'll do sort of like, yeah, a few minutes, 3 or 4 minutes or something, and come back. Nice. And yeah, if you're at home, you can just free write. So kind of let it free. Don't worry about getting it right and wrong. Just see if you can think of like 10 metaphors for what you're even doing when you're meditating or practicing. Yeah, like 3 or 4 minutes. No, together. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to go back into the small groups in a moment, so don't worry about coming too far back. But does anyone have any that they want to share quickly? That are like burning? No pressure. Yes.
A couple different ones. One I did was this space, which is sort of like almost like a master metaphor for awareness.
Space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it's weird. Like it's one of those metaphors that I take so literally that it's hard to see it's a metaphor. I'm like, awareness just is a space. That's what it is. It doesn't think that, you know. So.
Yeah. Cool. Nice. Okay. So that's nice. That's nice. Actually, that leads us on to our next thing very nicely. So the next exercise is we're going to do some more metaphors. But in this one, I really want you to take something that feels really deeply true to you, like just feels a bit precious and a bit sort of like, oh, this is the thing that is my precious thing. And I want you to come up with some metaphors that are really, that are really like absurd or wrong or weird, and just almost kind of like turn everything upside down on its head. And this really helps with the emptiness. It kind of like helps see the way in which the metaphors kind of like can help create emptiness. And so it's almost like really helpful as well to completely let go of the mind's idea of like, oh, this has to be true or right, and really just let go into like, oh, how wrong can I be, or how strange can it be? And it might be that by doing that, you hit on some like deeper truth or some alternative, slightly different truth that you hadn't considered, which is also true, or you know, but it's just to let go of that. So to give an example, for me, like love is one of the most important parts of spiritual practice and meditation. It's like, you know, the last session was on Eros, and that's really kind of like, yeah, it's something that it's very profound and deep for me. And I was talking last week, or sort of like almost coming from the foundation last week of like love as an interconnected life force that supports us all. And this sense of just like almost like a mycorrhizal network that we're all in, and the trust and the safety that creates, and the beauty. And that to me just feels incredibly true. And I was like, okay, so what if I take that and try to do something that's like really different around love? And the one that I came up with that felt really good was love is an evil dictator. And I was like, yeah, almost like trying to get it as wrong as possible, but I was like, there is still some truth in that. If you've ever fallen in love with someone who's bad for you, you're like, you know that feeling. A slave to love, yeah, really nice, yeah. So it's kind of like just being playful, doing some things that are wrong, that are absurd, and see where that ends up with something that feels in some way kind of important to you, because those are the things that sort of emotionally we kind of like can be least sort of flexible around, most rigid and tight. And so this sense of like when we're in a safe place where, you know, no one's going to like hold us to the thing that's been said, or it's just a playful expression, that can really create a lot of like flexibility and emptiness. So yeah, same groups again, I think, and just another 3 or 4 minutes. And again, at home, if you want to just write them down. Thanks, everyone. I hope that was rich and fun and interesting. Any that anyone wants to share that are burning? Yeah.
I'm just noticing some synchronicities. Once we got kind of flowing, there was just a lot popping. It feels so good.
Nice. Yeah. I was feeling that too. Felt like a really nice energy and nice. Cool. So that's kind of just a bit of an intro into the metaphor part, and I think hopefully one of the things that was maybe kind of revealing itself through that process of doing some opposites was the way in which in this sort of imaginal realm, one of the kind of like ways in which it operates is that many things can be true at once, that to the logical mind can seem contradictory, can seem paradoxical. The imaginal realm, one of its biggest kind of like most beneficial, most beautiful things is that it's like so just multi-dimensional and rich that you can just kind of keep finding additional things. So rather than, oh, it's this or it's this, it's this and it's this and it's this and it's this. And it has this kind of like beautiful, inclusive feel to it where, many things can be true. And I wanted to kind of do another sort of exploration into like the myth side of things a bit more. So the way I kind of relate to it is it's almost like metaphors are like little mini myths where it's like, oh, you're feeling into the depth of the truth of the moment and you're sort of like telling a tiny little story or a little expression of the moment and finding a way to be like this thing in the way that, if I was sort of to describe the depths of what I'm doing when I'm working with people often or teaching, it's almost like the little mini myths or the metaphors are, it's like we're becoming empty vessels for experience to flow through. Or it could also be, it could also be allowing the unique flowers of each being to bloom into life. And it's kind of like it can hold this sort of, non-selfy emptiness and this like deeply soulful, unique expression of each being. And each of those is almost kind of, it's metaphorical, but it's also like a little mini story that's being told through the language. And in the other way, it's like myths are kind of extended, multi-dimensional, like built out metaphors, where there's just a bit more sort of, kind of cultural resonance and story and meaning that's built into it. So they could be, like spiritual myths of whole kind of religious spiritual concepts and ideas. It could be like more modern pop culture, films, music, things like that. But it's almost like the sense of the feeling is kind of like being hit with a sort of like pre-built out world of metaphor and myth that you can then like resonate with and relate to. And this also kind of like has a nice sort of like dual capacity to it where it can help you really tune into like the essence of a moment and be like, oh, I really resonate with this deep kind of myth, like watching a movie and really like connecting with the character and being like, yes, that's really telling me something deep about my experience right now. And it can also act in the other way where it really like unravels assumptions and ideas and you're like, whoa, I'd never like thought to think about life like that, or if I relate to this character or if I relate to this thing, it kind of like turns everything upside down. So it can kind of do both at the same time. It's sort of like working with this essence that has truth to it, but also that has a huge amount of flexibility around it. So I'm going to do like a very short guided meditation, like 5 minutes or something. And then we're going to do a little more group discussion from what comes up from that. And then after that, I'll do a longer guidance on something slightly different. But I just wanted to first kind of like introduce this myth aspect and give people a chance to feel some of that. So yeah, if you can sit comfortably for the next 5 or so minutes. And yeah, just giving yourself a chance to land in your body. Allow yourself to be present. And if allowing the kind of feelings that came up from the metaphor exercise to be present. So if it was a sense of like playfulness or being stirred or moved in some way, just allow that to be here, whatever that was for you. And as you kind of settle into your body and into the present moment, just allowing a character of some kind to come to you, something that feels resonant, and just trusting in that sense of whatever comes is very welcome. So it could be something very, sort of timeless and spiritual, like a Buddha or a spiritual character, or it could be something very pop culture, very modern, someone from a movie or a book. And just asking the question that if the image is a metaphor for something that is deeply true in the present moment, what is it telling you? And it might have an explicit message for you. Or it might be just a mood, something more ineffable, a resonance. It could be that the character is somehow an expression of you and the depths of you, and you're resonating with that. Or it could be something from outside of you that's, come to tell you something or show you something about the present moment. And just feeling that sense of letting go of, that something needs to be the whole truth or logically correct in some way. And just really feeling that sense of what it's like to be just in resonance with something that feels meaningful in this moment. And when you're ready, we'll come back and we'll just go in small groups again, and maybe just share a little bit about what came up, what character emerged. And if it feels meaningful to share a little bit about the resonance or what felt meaningful about it for you. And we'll just do that for a few minutes.
Just that feeling. Oh, the feeling. Yeah. Yeah. The vibe. Monica.
So hopefully another fun exercise. And yeah, one of the things I love about this, and one of the reasons I like to introduce group work as well, is because it's so rich to hear about other people's just like such full worlds, and how much meaning and myth and resonance, and kind of feel the ways in which when people share things, you're like, wow, yeah, I can really see that that's like resonant with your being, and that my being's different and creates this different world, or the ways in which it's synergistic and you can really relate. It's just a really nice part of the imaginal realm, the way in which people hold so much meaning inside of them. And hopefully by sort of feeling into, just having this sort of introductory kind of like feel into both metaphor and myth, it's starting to show how when we connect to these more kind of creative and imaginative ways of being, it's sort of like life can kind of almost, it's sort of come alive a bit more. And it's almost, the feeling is kind of like, it's a bit glowy, it's more connected, it's more flowy, there's more space for play and expression. And it's super like fun and creates a lot more space in experience, which for practice can be really, really helpful and meaningful. But before we do the longer guidance, I wanted to bring in almost kind of like another aspect of how, of like what can emerge when we get in touch with this part of experience. So I find that one of the most interesting things is that almost all the people who are considered geniuses, or people who've kind of changed paradigms or done really interesting things, if you sort of dig into their history, you find this kind of like connection to the imaginal realm and the way in which they're thinking and feeling in this more creative, expressive, full way. I don't know if anyone saw the Oppenheimer film, but the way they sort of did their graphics with some of that kind of like really like unraveling thing was really cool. I really like Merlin Sheldrake, who wrote the book about fungus, and how mycorrhizal networks like speak to each other. He took LSD to help him understand the ways in which they think, because it helps us into this more kind of like associative, distributed, centerless way of being that is very imaginal. So it's almost kind of like like letting go into this more intuitive, deep understanding. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that, the imaginal realm, it can sort of like drift off a little bit and be a bit kind of like playful and sort of, which is nice. It can be nice, but really grounding it in like the depths of the like truth and knowledge that you have as a being, and the things that feel like alive. So with the Eros, it's kind of like staying really connected to your thread of like, this is really important to me. This matters. I really care about it. I'm inspired by it. And I'm going to relate to this through the imaginal realm. It's like, that's when things start getting really, really rich and really interesting. It becomes this kind of like, when you're in the imaginal realm, it's like a deeply informed process of finding a way to see and feel and relate to things that you intuitively really deeply understand and know and like want to be in contact with, and kind of find new ways of looking and new ways of being. It's really rich. And rather than sort of like being stuck in, because it's almost like logic, its limitation is that it's very sort of like, the image I get is a train track. It's a very kind of like straightforward line, and you get a bit stuck on the rails. And then if you know something really well and you relate to it in the imaginal realm, you start to be able to kind of like see and feel the depths of what you're working with. It's almost like you're sort of bringing up kind of like your hidden intuitive knowledge about something and giving yourself space to really, relate to it in a different way. And it's almost like the things that are, in the deepest nature of your being, in your knowledge, in your embodied wisdom, in all of your kind of like life experience, you can start to reach beyond where your rational mind can go and really allow things to emulate from this kind of deeper understanding, deeper knowing. And I wanted to feel into that with this guidance. So we're going to start, if you can think for a minute about a problem that you're having in life. So it could be something like technical and kind of like, oh, I'm not sure how to relate to this. Or it could be a more kind of like emotional thing, a relational thing, just something that feels a bit sort of like, oh, I keep getting stuck in this loop, or this feels a bit tricky, or I don't know how to relate to this. And it doesn't have to be super deep. It can just be something small if that feels more, more like salient, more current. And we're just going to kind of like invite it in and do some feeling with it in the imaginal realm through this guidance. Great. Any questions before we do that? Anything burning? No, looks good. Okay. Yeah, so if you find a comfortable posture. And we're going to start by doing some nice, slow, deep breaths. So breathing into the belly so that the belly expands. Breathing out through the nose. We'll do 3 of these. And we're really just giving our bodies a signal that we're safe, that we can relax. And even that feeling of safety helps with, setting the scene, laying the foundations for relating in this way. Because rather than being stuck in habitual pathways around problems, it's just right now in this moment, we have infinite space and infinite safety. The problem is not going to cause any issues for the next 20 minutes or so. And you're just going to start by inviting the problem into your experience. And from that base of infinite space and infinite safety, there's a sense of, the problem can come in and it can impact you and move you. Might create some emotional responses, but that's just all very welcome. We're in the imaginal realm, so with the problem, for example, if it feels overwhelming, you can just shrink it and put it at the other side of the room or something where it feels safe. Or if you want to let it in more, you can, expand it and kind of feel what it feels like to let it come towards you. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give, and this may have just naturally arisen, but we're going to give the problem an image which you don't have to be able to see with your mind's eye, but the sense of that it has some kind of shape, location, color. I'm just going to feel into some of the details of what is present in the image. So without judgment, it's almost just like painting a picture of if you had to do a Pictionary game and you were like painting a picture of what this problem is. Or if the universe was painting a picture for you about what the depths of this problem is, what details would want to be included. And now you have that image, it's like suddenly it becomes something that you can move with in different ways. So it's almost feeling the way in which it's sort of like an object in space that rather than being something that you're codependently sort of entangled with, it's just sort of an object in space that's representing something. And you can kind of, respectfully sort of try and do some different things with it. So almost, see what happens if you place it in a different location, or you could ask yourself the question, what would be the worst thing that could happen in this image? What's the best thing that could happen in this image? And we're going to see if you can pinpoint the precise location of the problem, be as precise as you can about, or that's the sticky bit in this thing for me. And see if you can locate it in that, like embodied, if it has some kind of image or location. And if a magical being came along and was just going to show you a completely different way of relating to this, what would they show you? And yeah, with this metaphor and myth aspect of experience, it's almost like I feel like I could just ask you 1,000 questions about this problem that would help reveal more and more, give you new ways of looking at it and understanding it. And there's a sense that that's part of that possibility that exists in the imaginal realm. And for the rest of the meditation, we're just going to come back to a bit more structure. So yeah, allowing any resonance from that sense of whatever you've felt or seen during this exploration to remain. And then just starting by connecting with the energy that's in your body. Just coming back to this embodied sense, it allows that alchemical level of the metaphor and myth to really impact and move things. And so there's the imaginal problem, the ways in which we've looked at it, and then there's the energetic sense of how you feel right now. And if there's any sense of strong activation or overwhelm or just being able to come back to those slow breaths and feel the infinite space and the infinite safety of the imaginal realm. And then we're going to feel into any emotions that are present and just make some space for those. Just welcoming in the emotional resonance or the emotional response to the problem without needing it to be any different. Sadness is often one that doesn't get given as much space. And then connecting with the imagination, seeing if there's anything further that wants to be expressed from this image. Anything it would like to say to you or you would like to say to it. Anything that, further wants to reveal itself or just be present. And then finally feeling into a sense of intuition. So is there anything that, you feel compelled to respond to in this image? And just making space for that to be shown. Are you drawn towards it or, pushed away from it? Is there something where you want to intervene or something that you want to say, and just kind of like noticing that intuitive response in you? And then equally, like with the metaphors, just making space for something wildly counterintuitive. Like what would be the most counterintuitive thing? And for the last 5 minutes, we're going to sit in silence. And there's a sense of, the space for things to reveal or unfurl. If there's a curiosity, if there's a sense of Eros, of something in the image that you want to follow the thread of, then please do that. Or there's also an opportunity to feel into a sort of meta part where that sense of, the infinite space and the infinite safety of the imaginal realm, the way in which, almost the backdrop that all these images appear from, the way in which it can be endlessly flexible, open, resonant, and there's no possible way to, get things wrong in the imaginal realm. It's just this kind of endless exploration that emerges from this infinite space. And with that, you can maybe, notice and feel the backdrop in which these images, intuitions, felt senses, however the imaginal realm kind of emerges for you. Like, what's the canvas that those things are appearing on? What's the backdrop? What's the background? You can feel into that sense. Or, like I say, follow the Eros of something in the image. And we'll sit for 5 more minutes. Yeah, feel free to stretch and move. So I wanted to talk about one more thing for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll go to Q&A. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about where this practice leads. So this series that I'm doing is from a model of experience that I have, and this is the imaginal realm kind of row, the soul realm row. There's also columns, so there's a body, a heart, a mind, and a soul column, and this is the mind aspect of the imaginal realm. And one of the cool things about the mind aspects is that there are these more kind of like black and white sort of realizations that can happen, almost kind of like tipping points of, if you practice in a certain way, there's an experience that can happen, and then there's like a before and an after. Whereas the body and the heart and the soul are all a lot more sort of swimmy and ineffable and kind of like just endless and ongoing. The mind tends to, have this sort of like these moments where everything sort of lines up and clicks into place, and you're like, oh, that thing. And afterwards it feels different. So to give some examples, the other things in the mind row is the first one is present awareness, and that tends to be a kind of cosmic joke moment of like, oh right, like it's this thing that we're doing right now, always. And people kind of like, there's often a moment there that can happen. The next one is spaciousness, which is that kind of like open awareness moment of like, it's like not all in here, it's like this open thing. And that's sort of, it's like a popping open that can happen. The next one is deconstruction. So that moment would be a kind of cessation experience where everything sort of completely deconstructs and reconstructs in a way where, there's a realization of that experience is constructed. And it's like this sort of, I guess, embodied experience that you go through where coming out the other side, there's a kind of much more space between you and experience. And with this one, the time when it's kind of like I've heard other people report experiencing something like this is when they've been on psychedelics. So this is something that I've experienced just from practice and can be done through practice, but I think a lot of people experience this much more on psychedelics. And the sense is, I was sort of almost like trying to feel into how to describe it. And it's like, if you've seen the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's like this movie with just like so many layers and everything, a meaning in every moment, and kind of like squeeze that whole film into a single moment. And then like inside every being, it's like you just squeeze the whole film, and it's like, that's in you in this moment, it's in you in this moment, it's in you in this moment. And then that can like go even fractal and smaller, where it's like every sensation has this whole kind of like insane associative sense of meaning that just is sort of like in every tiny sensation, emotion, thought. It's just a kind of like endless fractal extrapolation of that you can go further and further and further into, or expand further and further and further out, and it just goes and goes and goes. And it's almost like every little every sensation, every being, every thing is like a billion. It's just like infinite meaning making systems. And you can sort of like have moments where it's just like, whoa, every being has their own entire meaning making system in this way. And it's just really cool, and it can change the sense of what experience is. And I just think it's nice to sort of include that as a kind of experience, because it's almost like there's different ways of understanding the metaphor and myth, and it's really nice to have that just immediate, like, let's work with what's here. But there's also this kind of like, really transformative experiences that can be had either with psychedelics or through meditation practice that can really fundamentally change kind of almost like the sense of what it is to be a being. And I think that one of the things that it reveals those sorts of moments is, I was almost feeling into how it's almost like with cessation, there's a really sort of strong sense of kind of like non-duality and coming togetherness in a certain sense, and that creates a separateness where you can be less fused with your experience. And this almost does the opposite. It's kind of like everything is so separate in a way that is kind of mind-boggling, that every word has a different resonance and meaning with every different being. Every feeling is like never to be felt again. Everything has its whole entire own meaning-making system. And that's like mind-bogglingly, sort of separate and unique and really hard to sort of like get your head around. But then that sense of almost like total alienation and separateness and uniqueness then creates a kind of togetherness, because it's like, oh, you can't actually even be separate, because it's all this sort of symphony that's flowing together as one. We're here hanging out together, communicating with each other, despite the fact that each of us is in completely unique meaning-making systems. So it creates this much more kind of like, just sort of like flowy trust of, oh, we don't need to be agreeing exactly in this very logical way. There's a sense of like, oh, the thing is flowing, the meaning is happening. It's never going to be perfect, but it's just somehow coming together in this way that like works, even though we're all these completely different beings having all these a million different processes. Even within inside you, it's like a million different biological processes, emotional processes, like thought processes, all of this sort of like really disparate, wild stuff that has its whole own like world in it. And then somehow it pops together and the symphony is like playing, and it's these different things. So that feels a bit maybe like esoteric, but I wanted to include it because it feels like it's kind of cool to know that exists. And I think it's totally possible to sort of experience it, and particularly with psychedelics, if you have any kind of psychedelic practice, that can be something that really sort of comes alive and comes to the fore. So I wanted to talk about that. That's all I have to share. So we've got plenty of time for Q&A. And it can be from anything that we've done or talked about, if you want to share something or ask any questions. Do you know how the mics work? Yeah. Do you mind grabbing it? Thanks. Oh yeah, so we're streaming, so any questions will go be on the stream, just so you know. Thank you.
So, is it on? I don't know. Should I be hearing myself loudly?
No. Yeah, I can repeat back. That's okay.
I remember maybe it was in the first class you mentioned that like the greatest barrier to imaginal practice is sort of people not regarding what is there as good enough for imaginal practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this most recent guided meditation, I just worked with like drowsy distraction as the thing that was there and tried to make it the subject of the practice. So, I have like this dark, foggy cloud that I'm increasingly trying to get a handle on as a big object and stuff like that. I won't say it like didn't yield at all in the sense of giving a sense of unfolding or something like that, but it was like, it was quite sticky as drowsiness can be. And I'm wondering if like you have anything more specific to say about like what the handles are. Like, okay, if I was doing Vipassana, maybe I'd try to deconstruct it or something like that. How does one work when there isn't a kind of natural, spontaneous unfolding to the image, or doesn't seem to be?
Yeah, great. Yeah. So, if drowsiness, for example, drowsiness or something that's hard to work with is coming up in experience. One thing that can be a really helpful move with the imaginal is a really deep surrender, where it might be, and specifically with drowsiness, it might be that there's something underneath. Sometimes with the imaginal, it's like there's a sense almost of getting into a hypnagogic state, where you sort of let go, and then it kind of either happens or it doesn't. But there might be something there with drowsiness in particular, where with meditation you're so often drowsiness is, it's like a hindrance, isn't it, that you're sort of trying to overcome. It might be letting it win then stops it. That there might be something in that. But if it was, let's say you tried that one time and I was like, no, I want to work with it this time. I think like you said, it's almost kind of like giving it color, shape, like you did. Gratitude can be a really, really nice thing that opens something up, where there's a sense of like, oh, this is here for a reason. Maybe you're tired and haven't slept well and your body's just saying like, oh, I just need to rest a bit. Or maybe there's something that's like painful and difficult that drowsiness kind of covers up, or something like that. And just having a sense of kind of just thanking it and being like, thanks for being here. That can make space. Yeah.
Just because it was like I was trying to see it more like more in this kind of meaning frame, or what would be the basis to feel gratitude. And one of the things that came up that seemed to be beneath it that made it so aversive is I have a very familiar experience of meditating, becoming drowsy and or distracted, and then seeming to have implications for like my whole spiritual path.
Right.
Here I am once again not being able to follow the damn instructions.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like the pain of that feels like the thing underneath it. It's like the thing that holds the aversion to it in place. It's like, oh, if I succumb to this, then I just am not meant for all of this thing.
Great. Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
Would that be like a direction of unfolding?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that message, the message that you found, if you could then work with that and give that a shape, give that a voice. So you could, and by the way, this is like, I feel like this is ninja level stuff, where when you can start giving the shapes to the things that are the hindrances to the thing that you want to be doing. And then it's like, the deeper message. So if the deeper message is, you're rubbish at meditating, it's almost like give that character that's then saying you're rubbish at meditating or something. And then you can interact with that. And so it's almost like that sense of, everything that comes up, just feeling deeper, giving it metaphor, myth, and relating in that way.
Okay, cool. I did stop there. I sort of went like drowsiness, cloud, aversion, meaning, and then I didn't give it enough. So,
you can always just find more and more.
Should I pass this or is it not great?
I guess it's a
Okay, hi. I just thank you. I love how you are using modern cinema and metaphor in movies. I'm curious if you have seen the Maestro movie about Leonard Bernstein. Okay, so there's an example and then there's a question. In that film, it starts off black and white in the era of his emergence. And if anyone else has seen it, there's the moment where he and Felicia are falling in love, and it becomes a musical theater dance where she's reckoning with the fact that he's gay, but she's going to marry him anyway. And it's this multi-sensory, multi-level experience. And then it emerges in Technicolor with the 60s. So it's very well done. That example, or say like a Mary Zimmerman play, which is very visually existing on many levels, in working with people who have had psychedelic experiences, for whom they don't naturally go to a film to see the metaphor, they just go. Similarly, in an integration circle, what would you say would be guidance to help folks utilize the films or utilize any sort of sensory or artistic endeavor? Because they come with their material, and I try to use music and film in these examples, and some folks it's just not natural for them. So how do you help them get into, in ordinary consciousness, to apply the non-ordinary experience through that other lens to see differently?
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So I'll repeat the question a bit. There's a nice example of a film, The Maestro, was it? The Maestro, a film where it went from black and white into multicolor and some other things. And it's sort of how to get people into the sense of relating in that way when they're in a, when they're not on psychedelics. And I actually have a whole podcast with a friend where we watch films as if they're imaginal practice and then talk about each of the films. So Nouveau Shamanic Cinema, yeah. It's one of my most fun things. So it's almost like this series is kind of the building blocks of what are the things that people need in order to relate in this way. But I think that the first one that I sort of do with people is help them feel how their experience is already imaginal. It's not something they need to put on top. It's something that's in their body, in their being, and try and give people some simple examples. So, if they're feeling nervous, the sense of butterflies, that's like an energetic, imaginal thing already. The sense of if they're feeling calm, that's like, how does that feel in the body? Oh, it's relaxed. Feels maybe like a big ocean. It's like a nice deep blue color, things like that. Just get people to sort of slowly open to these bits that are already there, and find safe ways to share in that and recognize it and feel it. And then I think with the kind of the movie and the art thing, it's almost just like you can just give people that frame and say, imagine that this film is a dream that you're having and you're one of the characters in the dream. Then how do you relate to it? Yeah. Cool. Any other questions or reports or anything?
I have
Yes.
a question. I don't know if it's like fully, I don't know. I'm like, maybe I can answer it myself, but I do a lot of psychic classes, and I've done like hypnotherapy training, and a lot of this work that you've taught us reminds me of that, especially some of like the lead meditations. And the question often arises of like, well, how do I know I'm not just making it all up? Or how do I know it's not just imagination?
Yeah.
In these contexts. And I'm curious if you have an opinion, if there is a difference, or if it's, the way I was like just thinking about it, I'm like, well, it's more, the imaginal stuff is like symbolic of real emotions and
Mhm.
experiences. But maybe you can elaborate on your thoughts.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, it's yeah. So I guess the question is, how do you know you're not just imagining? And there's a subtle difference between almost like layering experience on the top and then listening to the resonance of what's present. And I think there's this, for a lot of people, there's like a, yeah, almost kind of like dipping the toe in the water and going in where it does just feel like you're imagining, because you can't, that's sort of part of it. And so it's almost letting go of the frame of like, oh, is this, am I imagining or am I not? And just letting it be in the sort of mystery of unknown. I think that's very helpful. There's something which is when it's more difficult to guide from a, like from this perspective. You mentioned about my guidances, and it's more difficult to guide from a like one to many guided meditation. When I'm working with someone one-to-one, it's like I'll ask them very specific, very unique questions, but then it's like so like I mentioned before, the calm of the body and like feeling calm, and that feels relaxed, and there's an ocean and it's dark blue. It's almost like, to me, that's a very like very deep dark blue ocean. That's what calm feels like. But to someone else, if I was working with them one-to-one and asking them about calm, it might be, as I asked, it might be like, oh, it's a shallow tropical ocean that you can see to the bottom in because you know that it's safe and there's nice colorful fish in it. And it's almost like the specifics and the uniqueness of your imaginal world and the way that things just do intuitively feel true to you where others feel different. It's kind of like that's the bit where it sort of, yeah, pops to life and becomes sort of, yeah, real for you in the way that the imaginal is real.
Yeah, so they're like responding with verbally with what they're seeing and relaying what they're seeing, similar to a one-on-one in a therapy session.
Yeah. And it's like yeah, and or some way in which you're sort of confirming and specifying your unique experience and seeing the way that that's different to other people's unique experience, then it becomes. And oh, that's interesting. Yeah, there's something subtle about like validation and trust where there's a kind of middle way where if it gets reified too much and becomes like, I'm having this imaginal experience and it's absolutely true, that can sort of pull people off in one direction. Or there's a kind of like doubt of like, oh, I'm not sure if this is real, and like or oh, I think probably everyone feels like this anyway, kind of like brushing it away. There's just a middle ground where it's like yeah, sharing in a place where it's like, I trust your unique expression. I trust and welcome your unique expression. And it feels like true and interesting to hear about it and receive it. And so there's a kind of relational container that can help with that.
Yeah, and what I also gathered from what you just said is like kind of, you know, when you've struck a chord with whether you're doing something with yourself or like a session with somebody, it's like you can play around and do all these playful, like ridiculous things, but if something feels really meaningful, then that is like the truth to like really expand on it like that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that description's spot on. Yeah, striking the chord of like, oh yeah, this resonates in some deep way. Yeah. Yes.
Just because you mentioned psychedelics, and I dabbled in recent years. When I have a powerful shrooms experience, I sometimes go into places that are amazing, super fun, very unique to me, and me that I didn't really know. And it's sort of repeatable. Like, you know, that space comes back if I do it again, but it's only when I'm with shrooms,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And you know, I don't know what the question is. It's like, does it make sense to try to recover that, try to meditate on it? It's a little scary because it's powerful, and out of character in some ways. Anyway, what comes up for you?
Yeah, love that question. So the question is taking psychedelics and having experiences that are powerful and different, and whether to sort of recover, go back to them, or how to relate to them. It's almost like there's a couple of ways of relating to them. So one is like, it's a powerful experience to have, and then respecting its container and leaving it, and just letting the resonance that happens. Another way is a more sort of like, I guess, integrative way of working, where it's almost like, oh, this is an important part of reality or being, and maybe there's a way of kind of like building some bridges and opening up some sort of more sustained kind of roots in. So I don't know, I don't want to give like psychedelic taking advice necessarily, but kind of like microdosing and seeing, or like doing different size doses, and like what happens on the way. And it's almost like I think on the first talk I was describing, it's like our mind's normally like this in its habit pathways, and then psychedelics sort of pops us, and it's almost like what's in between there and there. Just being curious, kind of like, or like if you're out here and looking back at this, what's that like, and and almost kind of like in the same way we were working with the problem of like giving things spatial locations, and kind of, it's almost like you could do that with this, and sort of imagine being in the mushrooms and looking back at yourself with like, what would you say, what would you advise? You can bring things into trips. So I think the one thing I think the thing that you're intuitively like maybe doing is I feel like it's not good to control the trip, and to have really like controlled ideas of, oh, I need to integrate this, or I need to get back here, or I think the sense I got from your question was like, you're pretty chill about, you like to go back and explore, but it's not like
I
Yeah.
like that place. I mean,
right.
specific thing, a very specific thing. No, but you said a lot of things that really help.
Yeah, and that's nice as well. Again, with the specifics of the imaginal realm, like write down the specific, what are the top 10 specific things you love about that place on mushrooms, and like get that kind of clear in your system, and feel in.
Words still don't do it justice, right? So you go down, like, okay.
Yeah.
It feels like toddling and like nothing to do, but I guess I get.
Yeah, and like feel the. I think the words not doing it just is almost, the words is more just like it's more like a way to, like a portal into the memory of the feeling, and then kind of like letting it resonate, letting it be energetic, emotional, and have that sense. Yeah. Any other questions or shares? Cool. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. We will finish there.